Well, I'm happy to be joined today with two women who have recently released a book called Dark Tide, a fascinating book about Ted Bundy's family. Growing up with Ted Bundy is the subtitle on the cover. Edna Martin and Megan Atkinson. Ladies, thank you for being here today. Uh,
Thank you so much. Thank you.
yeah, now, Edna, you are Ted Bundy's cousin.
Right,
How
I
did you
am.
connect with Megan?
Oh, well, that's quite a story. My daughter knows a lot of people, but she had a next door neighbor that lived next to her at the time, was a publicist in the publishing business, and they became friends. And she's the one that recommended that start off by writing a book. And she connected me to Megan.
Oh,
So
that's
that,
great. So you guys co-wrote the book together, and
Yeah.
it was released earlier this year. When darkness lurks within, for the first time, Ted Bundy's family discloses a lifetime of struggling with the unimaginable. So, Edna, why did you decide to write a book?
well, I waited a long time to do it. Waited almost 50 years. It was something that I had buried inside of me for a long time. And I felt like I needed to get it out, kind of get Ted out of my system. And I also had a story to tell, something that I thought should be shared about what it was like to be related to Ted. And we became really close during the time that he was committing the murders in the state of Washington.
Yeah, even just in the research I've done about the book, you were hanging out with him, right? I mean, as these murders, he was killing other women, you're hanging out with him.
Yes, and that's the chilling part because I had been out of state for about 6 years. My dad moved to Arkansas, where he was a professor there at the University of Arkansas, and then I came back to finish up my last 2 years at the University of Washington, my junior and senior year, and got an apartment in the University District just a few blocks from Ted. And so it was great. It was a reunion. We had a chance to get back together again, know each other more as adults rather than kids. And we saw each other frequently during that time. And he came by my apartment quite a few times during that time period.
Nate,
Megan, what
I've
did
talked
you?
about she's talked about, sorry, I'm jumping in here, but I think that this is an interesting tidbit that her parents actually felt comforted knowing that she had Ted nearby to help, as she transitioned to a new house and, a new apartment and going to school and all of that stuff. So his presence being close to Edna during this time period was actually a comfort to the family, if that says anything.
That's
That's the irony. That's
fascinating.
pretty
So,
ironic. Yeah.
I'm taking as is from hearing you and from reading a lot about this case and seeing documentaries and whatnot, and who knows how accurate those all are. But was he a charming, friendly, handsome, personable guy like we've heard over the years?
I think that was something he used to his advantage. And yes, he was. He appeared to be very comfortable around groups of people, one on one. My girlfriends really liked him. He was charming. He made you feel like you're the only person in the room. And I shudder to think how he used that skill to approach his victims. But yes, he was, and he was good looking. People liked him, and he was also smart too.
Yeah.
I want to go back to kind of the early days of your relationship with Ted. Before I do that, though, Megan, I want to ask you, in all of your research and in helping write the book, what was the biggest surprise to you?
Oh, I mean, a lot of what she just said, I think, I don't know if it was a surprise so much, but just how relatable Edna's experiences growing up with Ted were to me, to really everybody. She has these experiences. They had a cabin on Long Branch up in, Puget Sound area, and they would have family get-togethers where, the cousins would come over for the day and they would do all of this stuff. They would have a picnic outside and they would run around and play. And all of these different things that she would be doing as children with Ted and the Bundys. And it just feels like every family get together that I've ever had in my life too. And so I guess it's sort of unsettling really to understand, just how normal the life was with Ted growing up, and that you didn't really know what was going on or what was happening with him beneath the surface.
Yeah, the way you present it, I think all of us can, in our minds, picture that. It's, the beautiful area, and you're just hanging out with them. In your childhood, Edna, how often were you seeing them? I mean, did they live close to you, or was this more of a relationship that developed as you all got older?
Yeah, I mean, as small kids, we lived maybe 10, 15 minutes away from each other in the town of Tacoma. Actually, it was a city. Then we traveled a lot, and we also had a cabin that Megan described. So we saw each other on, family occasions. And as she said, it was all just normal, which is what most people who talk to me about this, it is the thing that disturbs them the most, is to find out that somebody you think you know really well isn't who they are at all. But you're right on point in terms of when I really got to know him was when I got older and was a college student, because we were more peers at that point. Before, because the difference in age is 5 years. He's
Okay.
5 years older than I am.
Can I jump back in time just a little bit really fast though, and kind of correct the record, because it's out there, but it's a little bit incorrect on the internet. It was Edna's family actually that Ted and his mother moved across the country to come live in the Seattle area with. He was born in Philadelphia and his mother wasn't married, and this was, at a time period where that was really taboo, and she was having a hard time, adjusting in the community where she grew up, being an unwed mother. And so it was actually Edna's father who had the idea for Louise and little Teddy, as he was called then, to move across the country and come and live with Edna's family for a while until she got her feet under her in the Pacific Northwest.
And
So they were
oh,
very close. The families were very close. They lived together for a time, and then she eventually moved out and met and married Johnny Bundy, and they had kids together, but they stayed in the Tacoma, Seattle area.
yeah, they lived with our family for almost a year.
Hmm.
And my brother was 4 and Teddy was 4. So there were two 4-year-olds in this house together until she established she created a whole new narrative about her life, changed her last name so people would not know that she was an unwed mother, which was really a pejorative term and a kind of a stigma, a lot of stigma during that time. And we were their only relatives on the West Coast. So that's why we were close.
Wow. So is his mom your mom's sister?
She is my dad's niece, actually. But my dad was one of 7, the youngest of 7 kids. So
Okay.
his very oldest sibling, Sam, by the time he had kids, they were about the same age as my dad. So
Okay.
So when he had Louise, she was 4 years younger than my dad. And so they became playmates, kind of like the same relationship between Ted and me in terms of age difference. So
Right.
he felt very protective of her. He always really loved her. And so when my parents moved from Philadelphia to the Seattle and Tacoma area, eventually they found out that this was a great place, and they thought this would be her opportunity to start fresh, which she did. She very successfully pulled it off.
And how many siblings does Ted have?
He is there were 4 more kids after he was born.
But he
That
was the eldest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
by far. He was, I think the next one was at least 6 years younger.
Okay. Okay. So you have this childhood. They live with you for about a year, and then they move into their own place. And then you said that you moved away.
Yeah, so I was born the year after they lived with us. So when I was 6 or 7, my dad was a concert pianist and a composer and a professor, and he ended up um, having this friendship with this amazing French conductor, and we ended up living in Paris for a couple of years, and also
Wow.
spent time in New York, where my dad performed at Carnegie Hall, well, the town hall, which is just a smaller section of Carnegie, and then we lived there, and then we moved back for a while, for a couple of years, and then we moved to Arkansas. So we were in and out of their lives. But Ted came through Arkansas while I was a senior in high school, while we lived there, to visit us on his way to Philadelphia, because he was on a quest and he did not know who his biological father was. And he could not get that information from his mother for whatever reason. She withheld that. And I know personally from talking to Ted that it really bothered him. He wanted to know about his roots. I think he wanted to have, some explanations about things. And I don't know specifically what those were, but I think he really had some unanswered questions. And so he stopped by to visit us, and then he went on to Philadelphia and stayed with his aunt and cousin while he was there.
I think it's interesting as part of the conversation to note that I think that Ted really idolized Edna's dad a lot, and that Edna's dad kind of stepped in. You can imagine as a young kid coming and moving with Edna's family, he was 4 years old, 5 years old at the time. Edna's father sort of stepped in as a father figure to Ted before, his mother went on and married Johnny Bundy, and they had their own family there. But I think that he really did look up to Edna's father quite a bit. And you can see, Edna's father was a concert pianist. He traveled the world. He toured around Europe and all of this stuff. And you can kind of see, I think, if you go and study Ted and sort of see, he had high dreams. He had lofty goals. And he really liked to present himself as somebody who was destined for big things, who was successful. And I think, honestly, truly, and I've talked about this a lot, that her family and Edna's father had a lot to do with that part of Ted's personality, which is kind of a fascinating thing.
Yeah, if he's looking to fill the void of not having his own father, your father fit perfectly in that gap.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they really loved him. I mean, they thought very highly of Ted.
Okay, so when he visits you in Arkansas, had the crime spree started at that point?
Not that we know of.
All right. So then you both end up back on the West Coast.
Yes, he was in Philadelphia for about 6 months, attending Temple University, as well as making forays out from there all the way up to upstate, New England. I think it was Vermont, wasn't it, where he was going to, I think that's where he was born, in a home for unwed mothers, by the way.
Yeah.
And then he headed back to the Seattle area to further his education. He went to Stanford for a summer and took Chinese, Mandarin. And then in 1969, didn't he go to the Republican convention? He was a delegate there from the state of Washington. Yeah. So he was really starting to get into the political world at that point.
Yeah, showing a real interest in politics. Yeah.
Edna, where did you go to school in Washington?
So when we weren't traveling, because I did probably, first through fourth grade, back then they didn't call it homeschool. It was correspondence school. My mom taught us because we were on the road so much.
Okay.
But I went to a public grade school for fifth grade, and then I went to a girls' private school for 3 years after that.
All right. Yeah, I wondered if he had gone to the same school as you, or if you were, in the same classes or whatnot.
No, that I was in Seattle. They were in Tacoma.
All right.
So later on in college, Edna finished up her college career at the University of Washington, which was where Ted had gone to school there too for a time. They weren't there at the same time because he had already graduated, but he still lived in Seattle. He lived just a couple blocks away.
Lived in the U district. He liked to hang out around university districts.
So when you guys would hang out there when you were going to school and he was living nearby, what type of things would you do? I mean, was it in groups with mainly women, guys and girls? I mean, or typical college activities?
You mean with Ted? You're talking about specifically with Ted. So Ted would often drop by my apartment, and I had roommates and friends over. And then he loved to be the center of attention. So he would tell stories about what it was like to work down in Olympia, which is our state capital. And he worked for the re-election campaign of a really popular governor at that time, which was Dan Evans, who, by the way, just passed away a couple of days ago at 98, I think. Wow. Dan Evans had written him a letter of recommendation to the law school at the University of Utah. Ted went undercover during that re-election campaign into Rossellini was his opponent, and he would don disguises even and try to pick up scoops about what was going on in the supposedly opponent's camp. There was a political reporter at the time for the Seattle Times that worked down there, who was definitely befriending him, and so he would tell us these stories about what it was like to go through all of that. And so we loved it. We loved hearing. He was working for the Seattle Crime Commission too, wasn't he, Megan? And he was writing pamphlets
About
on,
crimes against women. Yeah,
for,
specifically.
crimes, for women to protect themselves against crimes, and specifically a pamphlet on rape prevention.
Yeah.
So what was his
Wow.
motive for doing that?
Hmm.
I don't know.
Wow. So do you recall when you first heard about the case, about, one of the crimes that he had committed? Obviously, at the time, you didn't think it was him, but do you remember when this started to, hit the news that women were being raped and killed?
We knew something was going on. Something happened in January of 1974. And we weren't getting a lot of information, but we knew somebody had been attacked, that a young woman had been attacked, and we knew it wasn't far from where we lived. I subsequently found out that this woman lived across the street and around the corner from me.
Yeah.
And it turns out that that was one of Ted's first victims.
Confirmed victims. Yeah.
Confirmed victims, exactly. And I, and so I was working at the time at a restaurant called Pilgrim's Pantry, which was just less than a block from where I lived. And I would, I worked the late shift and, through dinner and into the evening. And I was starting to get afraid to walk home at night because we were hearing all of these things. And I had to go through a dark alley to get around my apartment building. And I was terrified. And as we all the girls were, and sometimes we could get somebody to walk home with us, but not always. And so I eventually quit that job and took a day job during classes so I wouldn't have to do that.
Wow.
And
They
then we would,
never put out any official, they didn't put out an official warning to people in the neighborhood that a violent crime had taken place, anything like that. These were all just whisperings and rumors that were going around the neighborhood. So Edna didn't know really what had gone on, if anything had gone on, just sort of a stalker. If I'm right, Edna, that we talked about that there was a stalker in the area. So I think it's interesting. This is a university district with a lot of college age people living there, and nobody really let them know that this attack had taken place. She survived. She's one of, the lucky ones that actually survived. But it was a horrible, horrible, violent crime. And like I said, it was just around the block from where she lived. It's horrifying.
right. And I mean, she's still living with disabilities and issues from that, but she's a brave woman that she's talked about it. And then the next month,
Yeah.
another young woman disappeared who actually was my age and one of my roommate's best friends.
Hmm.
And that was Linda Ann Healy.
Yeah.
And then that one put us over the edge. And meanwhile, Ted's coming over to my place. When this happened, we're talking about it. And
You're talking about it with Ted.
yes, because we're terrified. We're starting to go, my God, what happened to her? And I mean, it was just like she disappeared off the face of the earth and nobody knew where she was. And we knew it wasn't good because they found, something, in her room that was obvious a violent crime had taken place. And we were absolutely terrified. So we were teaming up and walking to class. I mean, if I walked to class, it would take me about 20 minutes to go from my apartment across campus to my class. I was really close, but I rode my bike as fast as I could because I was terrified somebody would leap out of the alleyway at us. We were all really scared. And yes, we're talking about it to Ted and he's commiserating with us, telling us, oh, this is really bad. It's an awful thing, let me know if you need anything, and
Wow.
yeah.
What happened with Linda?
So someone broke into her street level room. She lived in a house with other young women, and there was an outside door right near her room. And
Basement where she slept. Yeah.
yeah, what was that, Megan?
Right in the basement where she
Yeah,
slept. There was
in
another
a
girl who
basement
slept there too. And
level.
yeah, they were only separated by like a curtain, I think. Like there wasn't an official door, which is kind of chilling. But anyway, continue the story.
Well, he was able to get through that door. I don't know. I'm sure he cased out the place. Now, when that place where Linda lived was only a few blocks from where Ted's girlfriend Liz lived. So when he wasn't at his rooming house room near me, a couple blocks from me, 5-minute walk, he was with Liz. And Linda was only a few blocks from where Liz lived, which was maybe about a 15-minute walk from where I lived. So very close as well. But that's what happened. And somehow he got in there and got to her and got her out of there.
Yeah. They found, when police came in later, they found her bed had been made, which is kind of chilling. And I think her pajamas were folded or something like that she had been wearing. But when they unmade the bed, there was bloodstains that they found down on the pillow or the mattress. I can't remember exactly which one. So they knew something terrible had happened. But Edna's right. She just disappeared. She just disappeared off the face of the earth for a while. And Edna and her friends, because they knew, Linda,
Well,
they're
not only did they know her, they had, before they became my roommates, when we got a house together, Linda was their roommate.
yeah.
They were really close with her.
And did they eventually find her?
They did, but it
Yes.
wasn't for quite a while. Like that summer, I think is interesting because it took police a while to sort of figure out that a lot of these disappearances were connected, right? And so there had been others in the area at other universities kind of around the region and whatnot. But it wasn't until later on in the summertime that it was around the time when Georgianne Hawkins went missing. She also went to the University of Washington, and she went missing from right outside her sorority house. In an alley that was like 20 feet long or something crazy like that. She just went missing. That the police started to put together and figure out that these were connected. So it's interesting because Edna, because of her relationship, through her roommate to Linda Ann Healy, they were already sort of aware of this thing that was going on and kind of, reading the newspapers and, nervous and whatever about it. And it really wasn't until later on that the public started to become more aware. And then it just took over the Seattle region. I mean, Edna talks about people used to hitchhike, and hitchhiking almost just ended overnight. They just stopped.
Hitchhiked, which was insane to think of,
Yeah.
But exactly, almost overnight. There used to be 30, 40 people at the freeway entrances near the university. And then the next day, after all this started happening, and almost overnight, nobody was hitchhiking.
Wow.
And in fact, you talked about Georgianne Hawkins. Just like 2 nights before she disappeared, or 1 night, 2 nights, I had dinner with Ted. And my roommate and I had dinner with him, and we talked about all kinds of things and things that had been happening. And of course, a lot of other things as well. And then just a little over 2 nights later, he went after Georgianne.
Yeah.
So any idea, by the way, Megan, how many total victims of Ted Bundy there are?
Well, the number officially is like around 30, I think, is kind of what they have. And this is based a lot on, of course, the research that the police have been able to put together, but also on confessions that Ted made in his very, very final days right before his execution. However, there's some kind of like slippery information here a little bit when you get into it. And, even so the lead detective on the case in King County in Seattle was named Robert Keppel. And he's spoken many times. He wrote a book talking about how he feels that the cases that they know about, like Linda Ann Healy, like Karen Sparks Epley, they seemed almost too practiced. And so he believes that Ted was actually probably killing people like hitchhikers or runaways or, traveling or whatever, and getting some practice in before 1974. So it's unconfirmed. There's still to this day, cold cases, interesting things. There's remains of people that were found so Ted had a couple of quote unquote dump sites where he would keep the bodies. and there still remains that are unidentified in some of these dump sites. So I think that we'll never really know the number, to be honest.
As
So
well as, yeah, some of these parents have they've never been able to find where their daughters were buried and left.
Yeah.
And to this day, I mean, so we constantly are thinking about the families of the victims, what they've gone through, and they
right.
never got to say goodbye. You know, it's just horrible.
Yeah.
So out of the 30, all women,
Yes.
all women. And from 1974 until when?
Well, then he moved to Utah, and a whole slew of women disappeared there, and
Yeah.
then Colorado. And
Yeah.
there is even some speculation that there may have been one or two in Idaho.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Even possibly even in Eastern Idaho, we've heard, you know, from people here. So all of this time, Edna, you're still having dinners with him. You're still chatting with him, and you're actually talking about the crimes he's committing, and he's playing it off like, oh yeah, this is awful. This is horrible.
Yeah, my boyfriend at the time, who's my husband now, even confronted him right after the disappearances of two women at Lake Sammamish. This was in the middle of July of 1974. And then Ted comes over later that week, probably a Friday, because my husband worked all week and drove up from the Tacoma area. And we had the paper there with these composite sketches of, because people there witnessed somebody going around and approaching people, and who also was wearing a sling, who they overheard him say that his name was Ted. And some of them saw this car that he was walking towards, which was a VW bug. And my cousin had a VW bug. And so they got a couple people to do a composite sketch of him, and that showed up on the front page of the paper, the local papers in the Seattle area, PI and the Seattle Times. And so we got those papers because we were just, you know, consuming every bit of information we could get. And Don comes up from Tacoma, and while he's there, we hear the dog barking, and we look out the window, and there's Ted's VW bug parked out front. And he comes in, and one of the first things my Don does, because Don, we felt sorry for Ted that the name that he was being connected to this, because we couldn't imagine in our wildest dreams that he had anything to do with it. And so Don thrusts the paper into his face and says, "Hey, this looks a lot like you, Ted," which we really didn't think it did. But he was kind of joking at the time. And Ted just completely rolled with it. It didn't even faze him one bit. He was
Wow.
so smooth. And he just goes, "Oh, I know. It's just terrible what's been going on. And by the way, the police have interviewed me too."
Oh,
And
he
we were
said
just,
that.
yes. And our jaws just dropped. We were just like, they did? Oh God, you poor thing. I mean, what but then he followed up quickly and said, "No, I was glad to do it. They were just doing their job, and you know, I wanted to do whatever I could do to help."
He said that the police were interviewing everybody in the state of Washington whose name was Ted, who owned a Volkswagen, right? And he inflated the number and said how many, like there were 400 or something people like that, which we found out later wasn't true. So he inflated that number, but that's what he brushed it off as, is, you know, oh, they're just doing their job. You know, they're just calling everybody who has a Volkswagen, who happens to have my name. You know, I was happy to talk to him. We, you know, it was a quick conversation like that.
So had they talked to him or no?
They had talked to him.
They had talked to him.
They had already talked to him. They'd already, in fact, he was on their list of people to, you know, to interview, and they had already talked to him by the time we, you know,
Okay.
confronted
So
him.
he didn't lie about that. They
No.
had talked to
Don't
him.
lie about that.
So when he moves to Utah, did you know that he was going to Utah?
Yeah, he told us that he got accepted at the law school at the University of Utah. And so
And then
this,
when the crimes start happening there, did you ever connect? This is, or did you follow the story really?
well, interesting. I mean, Megan and I've talked about this a lot, is that a lot of news was not shared between jurisdictions. So we didn't know for quite a while what was happening.
Yeah.
And even police departments weren't, even in local communities, weren't sharing, not very adept at sharing information, much less interstate or nationwide. So we didn't know about that for quite a while. That
Right.
that things started picking up in Utah, and they had stopped in the state of Washington.
Yeah.
Right. Very different times than today with
Yes.
internet.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably partially why Ted was able to get away with it as long as he was too, because he could just go to a different area and just kind of start fresh,
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and they didn't have the DNA type of technology that they have today either.
right, and no cell phones to track or
Cell
surveillance
phones to
cameras
track,
and
no VICAP, no ways to, yeah, there was so many things that actually resulted because of him as well.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Do you remember when Ted was arrested or when you found out that he was the suspect?
oh, very clearly, I do.
Tell us
Yes.
about it.
Well, so it wasn't for a year until a year later. So he left in fall of 1974 to start school. I don't know if he started right then or not. And then the following year, I took off in late August, early September to go work up in Alaska. And so I was out in Dutch Harbor, out in Aleutian Islands, working on a ship, on a crab processing ship. So I get a ship to shore call from my brother, and so I go up to the bridge, and so I'm already anxious because I'm pulled off the line and I'm hoping nothing's wrong with my family, but I had no preparation for the call that I got. And what the information was from my brother was that Ted had been arrested for Utah for an abduction, an attempted abduction in
Yeah.
Utah.
That was Carol DeRanche. Yeah.
That was Carol DeRanche.
And what'd you think?
I was absolutely blown away and freaked out and upset. It's just like my world turned upside down. I mean, if Ted had done something like this, it was impossible. I couldn't come to terms with it. I was horrified, first of all, because of the type of crime it was, and that my cousin was being arrested for this. And so on one side, I was going, God, it must be just the wrong place at the wrong time. This is a terrible mistake. To just these horrific feelings that I was trying to tamp down, the what ifs, what if he really is guilty? So just a combination of things. I mean, it was one of the worst days of my life, really.
Then when you got back to the mainland, did you try to reach out to him as the story's developing, or what did you do from there?
Yeah, because so when I got back to Seattle in December after finishing up a king crab season, there was one of the first things I wanted to do was get hold of Ted, and coincidentally, he was out on bail at the time. And it started off as $150,000 bail, and it was reduced to $15,000. And so when you pay bail, apparently you pay 10%. So they came up with a $1,500. A lot of relatives contributed to help bail him out, and he was out on bail in Seattle.
The reduction
Wow.
of bail, Edna's family took as further proof that they didn't have a case against him. They
That
thought
was such a low bail. We thought, well, they must not have a lot against him.
yeah,
Wow.
the family was still standing behind him and, really believing him.
Yeah. I mean, because the information that we had and the person we knew couldn't possibly have done this. We did not know how skilled Ted was at wearing different masks. So the person he put forward to us was this successful, up and coming young man who was going places, who was charming and loving, right? That was the mask that he wore around us. We hadn't
Right.
seen the other side yet.
I,
So
I did not know that he got out. Did he go on to kill more people?
not while he was out on bail that we are aware of. He was pretty closely watched during
Yeah.
that time. But we did get together, and I did get a chance to spend some time alone with him, and I did confront him
And
alone.
Is 100 pounds at this time, I should say. She's been, working on the seafood processing plant up in Alaska. And she's, coming back. She's like less than 100 pounds. She's like tiny.
Lost
And
a lot of
he's
weight.
in a car with Ted Bundy asking him if he's guilty.
Now we're driving along and I'm going, so Ted, did you do these things? Did you kidnap that woman and some of those other women that they're accusing you of, and do whatever you did? I was having a hard time getting it out and saying it because it was too horrific, and I just didn't want to believe it. And I'm driving along and I turn and I look at him as I ask the question, and he doesn't even hesitate. He says, of course not. It's just a horrible mistaken identity. We're going to get it all cleared up. It's a terrible thing, and it's awful to be in this position and be accused of something like this. But no, that never happened. And he denied it.
And you believed him?
I really wanted to believe him. And I was so relieved at that very moment. I went, oh, thank God, because I wanted, these were the words I wanted to hear. I didn't want to hear any other words. It didn't even cross my mind what I would do if he had said, yes, I killed those,
Right.
Girls being alone in the car. It wasn't until afterwards I went, oh my God, what if he had said that he had done it and I was alone with him in the car? This would have been just, what would I have done? I don't know what I would have done, but I ran a lot of scenarios through my mind of what I might do. But yeah.
When did it all come together that he actually did it, and not just the few that maybe were being talked about at the time, but that it spanned so many states?
So when did they start discovering that he had done it? Or
well, when did it hit you
Okay.
personally? Like, oh my word, he's
Well,
behind this.
yeah, it was that same day actually,
That
because
same day that you confronted him?
yes, and it wasn't that time in the car because he had reassured me that he hadn't done it. But we were on our way to, I needed to go to the university bookstore. I wish I could remember what it was so important that I needed to get, but it's a well-known store right in the U District that all the students go to get supplies and cool, Husky jerseys and all kinds of stuff, as well as books. And so we pulled in there in the parking lot behind the building. I said, hey, look, I'll just be a couple minutes. If you mind hanging out here while I do that? He said, not a problem. So I ran in and I grabbed my stuff, and I'm at the cash registers, which actually as the customer, I faced these floor to ceiling windows looking out on what they call the Ave. Right there where it's busy, full of shops and places where students hang out and restaurants. And I'm, getting my stuff rung up, and I'm looking out and I start seeing a big commotion outside.
Let me just interject here really fast and just give a tiny bit of context. This is the University District where a good number of the abductions and murders in Seattle had taken place.
Mm-hmm.
And Ted is now a famous name in the newspapers because he was arrested in Utah, and they were also investigating him in relation to all of the murders that had been taking place in Seattle. So he's a well-known entity, especially in this exact place where they are at this time. So anyway, keep going, Edna. You're telling the story so well.
His name has become well known. That is true. It was a really good point, Megan, because I see this commotion and people are pointing down to my left, which is down to the corner of 43rd and University Way. And I'm going, what's going on out there? And I start getting a bad feeling about it. So I walk out the front door. Now, remember, I left him on the back of the building, but I walk out the front door, and I ask a couple people, and they say, there's something going on down at the corner. And all these crowds of people are starting to point and head down that way, because some of the people have come back and mentioned apparently what was going on, that there's some guy down there. So I'm on the opposite side of the street. I go down, I get stuck by a red light, and there's just, I could see across the street, there's crowds milling around people. It's a kind of a big corner, so there's a lot of room for people to be milling around. And while I'm waiting for the light to change, the crowd's slightly part, and I can see my cousin is in the middle of it. So he's gotten out of the car, walked around the building and crossed the street and come over to this corner. And he is doing something that absolutely sends chills down my spine. He's got his arms out, and he's kind of looks like he's in a trance, and he's slowly rotating, and he's loudly proclaiming in a very loud voice, he's going, "I'm Ted Bundy." And he's doing it over and over again as he slowly rotates in the middle of this crowd that's starting to grow a bit hostile, as you can understand why. And I finally make it across and I kind of shoulder my way towards the front of the crowd because I can't even believe it. And he's doing this. He doesn't even see that I'm right there. And I go, I've got to stop him. And
Yeah.
so I run up to him and I slap my hand across his mouth and grab him by the arm. And I say, "Ted, come with me." I grab him and he comes with me. I haul him through the crowd and out of there. And people are in his face and they're, getting hostile and saying things to him. And I'm thinking, oh my God, would somebody do something like that if they were innocent? Because he looked like he was enjoying every minute of it and like he was some kind of a messiah. So
Wow.
I haul him back and shove him into my, you know, my my Ford station wagon and drive him home. And I'm
Wow.
absolutely at that point going, "Oh my God, he did it."
It clicked.
It clicked because that changed everything for me. And I was so terrified. I turn and I look at him. I I was scared to look at him at that point, but I look at him and it was a bad decision because he's just looking back at me and he's smiling right at that moment. I go, "Oh
Oh
God."
man, that'll give you chills.
He
Jeez.
knows I know. And then I think, "Oh God, what if he attacks me because he thinks I know." And then I run these scenarios through my mind that I'm gonna run my Ford Squire Woody wagon that I had saved up my money to buy that I loved. I'm gonna crash this car. If he makes a move towards me, I'm gonna turn it into a parked car and I'm gonna crash it. I'm just gonna do whatever I need to do so that we're, so that it's such a cataclysmic event. We'll be lucky to survive it, but at least I won't be his victim.
Right.
But he didn't do it. He didn't make a move. He didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. 5 minutes later, we pull up in front of Liz's house, and he just opens the door, swings his legs out, and gets up and walks to the door. And he slams the door. I leap over and I hit the lock. And I put my head on the steering wheel and go, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God."
When's the next time you talked to him?
So it's quite a while after that because this is after he has attacked and murdered some of the women at the Chi Omega sorority in Florida.
Well,
And
wait, you spoke to him on the phone.
right, but sorry, you're right. He's still this is right after he thank you, Megan.
That's what I'm here for.
um, okay, so he goes back to Utah to go through, because he's got to get back to jail there, and then he's released to go to stand trial in Colorado for 2 abductions and murders there.
Mm.
And he's escaped once during the summer. He jumped out of the law library or the library, what was it? The law library window?
He was representing himself, so he had certain
Representing himself, so he had, certain freedoms. And he was gone for about a week into the mountains and almost succumbed to hypothermia. And then he steals a car and
sprained his ankle. It wasn't a good plan. No.
it was not a good plan. And a policeman sees him driving erratically and pulls him over. So this is about 6 months later. He calls me and out of the blue, hadn't talked to him. This is December of 1977.
78, I think, wasn't it? Or was it 77? You're right.
29th. Yeah, my daughter wasn't quite 1, and she was born at the beginning of 77.
There you go.
And so this was December 30th. And the phone rings, and we're living in we have moved from this spectacular house that Dawn built for a client to this little trailer. It was the only thing we could find to rent out there near Long Branch and out in the Key Peninsula. And so we're in the middle of the woods.
Right.
And we get this phone call. I get this phone call. I pick it up. It's my cousin, Ted. So it's been about it's been about 2 years since I've spoken to him.
What'd he say?
He's, first of all, I'm thunderstruck that he called me and I hadn't talked to him for quite a while because I was so shocked by everything he was being accused of. But then he calls me, and so his main purpose for calling me was he wanted to know what I thought if he escaped. And I thought, oh my, I said, you can't, first of all, how can you possibly escape this time? They must have you locked down and, you know, on 24-hour watches because you did it once before. And I
Yeah.
was positive they had to be listening into his conversations. It wasn't till later we found out, because again, he was representing himself. He had a phone card. He had special, um, you know,
Privileges.
privileges,
Yeah.
exactly, that he could make these phone calls. And I told him, I said, well, I think that would be a terrible idea. You're standing trial, and from what I've heard, you might have a chance to have a pretty good defense. And I just completely poo-poo it. I think he's just pulling my leg, because
Right.
by now I don't trust anything he says. And he also says something really disparaging about my brother during the call, saying, well, he was the weird one. He's the one that should be in jail. And I went, that is so random. Why would you say that about a guy who's doing very well, running his own consultant business, and he was a computer guru and all these things. He was doing very well, and I was very offended by that. And so our call kind of ended after that. And then
Wow.
that's the night he escaped.
Yeah.
I also found out that he called my brother too, right after he talked to me, and um, asked the same question. And my brother said the exact same thing to him, like, no, no way. And John and I hadn't talked yet, so I didn't know that he didn't know that Ted had talked to me. He asked my brother one more really important question. He said, so, hey, John, I mean, where, what are the worst states for the death penalty? And my
Hmm.
brother is a super analytical dude, and I think he asked John this before he said that he was thinking about escaping, because otherwise John wouldn't have probably answered this question. But and John said, well, Texas and Florida, those are they'll execute you if you if you commit murders there. And that's Ted chose one of those too. And
Wow.
next day, and then for 45 days, we did not know where he was, and we were terrified he was going to come to us.
They woke up on New Year's Day with the FBI knocking at their door on this trailer in the middle of the woods, trying to find out if Ted was there, or seeing if they were going to aid and abet him as a fugitive. And so, of course, the lasting information that Edna and her husband are left with, and their 1-year-old baby, is the FBI thinks Ted is going to come here. There's a really good chance Ted might show up here. So
And they weren't right, and they weren't the only ones that came by. That was the highway patrol, the local, Pierce County detectives, the police. I mean, it was a steady stream for days and days of people coming by,
Right.
and just wanting to make sure we understood that we didn't help this guy. And my husband said, he said if he comes near here, it'll be a fight to the death. And because he's killed other people, he's
Where did they ultimately find him 45 days later?
Florida.
Florida.
Yeah, after he'd attacked a sorority house there and killed 2 people, and 2 other women were pretty horribly assaulted, but they survived.
Kathy Kleiner, that
Yeah.
Yes, I met Kathy. The
yeah.
name of the book is called Dark Tide, written by Edna and Megan. And one of the things that caught my eye, both of you, is that I believe, didn't you say there's never before seen photos and handwritten letters from Ted in the book?
Yes.
So were you writing him while he was in prison, Edna?
Yeah, I finally started writing him after specific things happened, especially when he looked like he was finally going to lose his appeals with the death penalty. And so I wanted him to come clean about where some of these, some of his victims were buried and to help the families. So I wrote these letters and I went after him pretty hard, trying to get him to at least do one thing for humanity, you know, and because he was going to die.
Mhm.
They're
So this
incredible
would be,
letters, incredible. Like it's worth reading just for these letters. She really goes after him, and he doesn't write back to her initially because he's so, annoyed with his cousin trying to get him to confess and whatever. So she writes him multiple letters, just begging him to confess. And, you can really feel Edna's emotion in these letters. I hate you for what you did to these women and children, like just these explosive things that she's saying in these letters. And he gets so mad that ultimately he finally responds. And not only does he respond with a letter that he'd started but hadn't finished because he couldn't finish it. And he sends that letter, he sends this other letter that he's writing, and he sends her back all of her letters so she can just read them again and really think about, what she was asking him to do. So it's incredible for us because we have both sides of the conversation.
Right. Yeah. Well, did you ever go see him face to face?
I offered to him, and in fact, in those letters, I frequently offered to come see him, but he had to be straight with me, and he never took me up on the offer. And the detective wanted me to go, and also Richard Larson, who is the political reporter for the Seattle Times, they offered to send me there. But at that point, after all he had said to me, I knew he wouldn't drop the mask with me and ever admit to anything he had done. He couldn't do that. And then I didn't want to expose myself to that level of evil.
Or publicity either, I have to say. Like,
Publicity.
such a
Yeah.
media circus around that time at his execution. There's no way you would have been able to go and not gotten found out. Edna had done a very good job of protecting her family and living under the radar and being anonymous so that nobody knew who she was. And that would have ended immediately as soon as you went to visit him in prison. And so,
Sure.
there was a lot of considerations that you had going into that decision.
So the crime started in 74. Here we are 50 years later.
Yeah.
Um, does it seem, Edna, a little surreal? I don't know if that's the word because you lived this for so many decades. I mean, what's your overall takeaway now, 50 years later, knowing that one of the most notorious serial killers that everybody still talks about was your cousin?
I wouldn't wish it on anybody, to be honest. Um, there's a reason why I didn't talk about it for 50 years. It was painful. It was the ultimate deception, and you had to ask yourself, how could I have not even had a clue? And I know a lot of people that knew him, worked with him, were related to him, his family members. I mean, he he managed to fool all of us, but after 50 years, it's just it finally I needed to get it out. I realized by not talking, that's not healthy. And that's, anytime anybody has something that's traumatic, and I know a lot of people listening to this, I'm sure have gone through things a lot more traumatic than I've gone through with him, that it's important to talk about it. And I should have a long time ago, because just the fact I'm talking about it now has really changed a lot of things for my life. It's released him out of my system, and it's also the unexpected result of it is that I've had so many people who've come up to me and felt like they could tell me about things in their lives that were really traumatic that they've never told anybody. And I'm very humbled by that. And all I can do is listen, but I'm also really happy for them that they're starting that dialogue to release some of these things that have haunted them all their lives. So
I feel
that's
like we've just scratched the surface, and I guess you'll have to read the book to find the rest of the story. Dark Tide, it's out now. Edna Cowell Martin and Megan Atkinson wrote the book. I guess you can get it on the typical, places. Do you have a website though that you're recommending people go to?
Yeah, it's called darktidebook.com.
Great. Ladies, thank you so much.